Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Vanessa Messenger. She is here to celebrate her beautiful children's book. It's called Teddy's Talk. She's also here to let us know that November is Diabetes Awareness Month. Before we invite Vanessa into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by Astronauts and Aquanauts, a great award-winning book from our buddy, our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. Space and the ocean. If you don't think they go together, think again. Join us on an amazing journey as we go up into space with astronauts and dive deep down into the ocean with aquanauts to explore the far-off places of our planet and solar system. You might be surprised how similar the domains of astronauts and aquanauts really are. Presented and written by the Reading with Your Kids Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson, this awesome book will give you a peek inside how real astronauts and aquanauts do their jobs and may even inspire you to become one yourself. This book can be found at most online booksellers and bookstores, and you can even ask for it at your local library. We also want you to be sure to check out Jennifer's website, jenniferswansonbooks.com, for activities and videos that go along with the book. And finally, take a listen to her podcast that launched here on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's called Solve It for Kids, the science podcast for curious and creative kids and their families. Joining us right now from the great state of Michigan, our guest today is here to talk about a really important book. It's called Teddy Talks. Please welcome to the show, Vanessa Messenger. Hey, Vanessa. How are you?
Hi, Jed. I'm so good. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm really excited to talk to you today about Teddy Talks and especially talk to you about the subject. Tell us about this book, please.
Yeah, so Teddy Talks, a positive story about type 1 diabetes, is really meant to inspire, educate, and normalize type 1 diabetes for kids who are recently diagnosed or maybe have a loved one, a friend, or a classmate with type 1 diabetes.
Now, as I established with Vanessa before we started, type 1 diabetes is what a lot of people my age, folks almost 100, referred to as juvenile diabetes. It's something that's typically diagnosed first in kids, but it can also be diagnosed in adults.
Yeah, exactly. So in my case, I was actually diagnosed when I was around 23, 24 years old. So it can really happen at any time. But, the thing that really occurred to me was, if this is a condition that is so often diagnosed in kids, why isn't there an easier way to explain the condition to kids? And that was really the inspiration behind the book.
So tell us a little bit about what a kid who may be 5, 6, 7 years old, what does that kid hear when he's told, you have type 1 diabetes?
Yeah, so, really what goes through your head, in my opinion, when you're first diagnosed is, okay, I have to give myself shots of insulin medicine every day now. I can't eat maybe all of the quote unquote fun stuff that I used to love to eat, the candy and the soda and all of that. I think that when you're newly diagnosed, there are a lot of kind of scary stories that you hear about things going wrong. But with all of the advancements that have been made from a technological standpoint with continuous glucose monitoring, the fact that we have insulin these days, there are so many amazing tools to manage the condition effectively that really you can live a long, happy, healthy life with type 1 diabetes.
Now, type 1 diabetes is, so there's type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and I know type 2 diabetes is typically, and correct me if I'm wrong, the result of lifestyle, that if folks are eating the foods with lots of sugar or not exercising enough, that they can develop that typically as they get older?
Yeah, that is the most common association, I think, that people that comes to mind with type 2 diabetes is more of those lifestyle influences. Type 1 diabetes, while we don't really necessarily know what causes it, it's not related to those specific lifestyle choices. So type 2 diabetes means that the person's body is resistant to insulin, whereas in type 1 diabetes, your body doesn't produce insulin. So, there are so many different things that we want to consider as far as the different misconceptions that are out there. A lot of times I think people lump the two conditions together, and they are so different that was really another kind of driving force of this book, is just to shed light on that kind of misinformation that's out there.
Yeah. And so what does it mean when your body isn't able to make insulin? Why do we need insulin?
Yeah, so insulin is a hormone that allows us to convert food into energy, essentially. And I'm not a doctor, so I don't have, all of the medical terminology. But that is the easiest way that I kind of like to explain it. And so, without insulin, the sugar will just build up in parts of our body and won't be able to be used as energy to do all the fun things that we love to do. So it's important that we are taking insulin medicine in order to make sure that the energy is getting to our different organs and not just building up in our bloodstream.
Yeah. Well, we've had lots of doctors on the show, and I love having doctors. I get a chance to learn so much, but sometimes they talk over this simple person's head. So I love being able to talk to you, because if, I have a better chance of understanding your explanation of it than I do sometimes of a medical experts.
Well, I'm so glad. And that, again, really was what I was trying to get across in the book. One of the things that I love in the book is that it has a glossary of common terms right at the beginning of words that, you might hear when you're newly diagnosed, like insulin, continuous glucose monitor, things like that. So I think that is really helpful for kids especially too.
I'm imagining if I'm a 6 or a 7-year-old guy and I hear from my doctor that I have to manage and monitor, and that just sounds like a lot of work that I don't want to do.
I know it does sound like a lot of work, right? I think that it becomes a routine for us, and it just goes to show the importance of investing in your body, of what you put in is important. Exercising every day, leading a healthy lifestyle is so important. And I think that for me personally has been a critical part of my management with type 1 diabetes.
So what was I'm not sure. Maybe I should ask you, did you always dream about being a children's author?
I did. I always just have been so gravitated to storytelling, and always wanted to write a children's book. And when I was diagnosed, I thought this would make for a great message to, one, kind of unpack the diagnosis for people, sort out those misconceptions, and lead a, healthy, happy life, and use that as hopefully a source of inspiration for people to understand that you can really thrive with this condition.
Yeah. And I think that's positive and really helpful, because as you were speaking, we've talked about what a kid would think about when he or she hears that he has this thing called type 1 diabetes. But I am guessing that parents who are hearing that their child has type 1 diabetes, they need to be reassured, and they need somebody to hold their hand and help them understand that this isn't a death sentence, that this is something that can be managed, and that kids who have type 1 diabetes can really thrive.
Exactly. And that's really what I want families to anchor on, is this message that, This doesn't have to hold you back. This is something that you will develop into a routine and you'll live with it and you can thrive and it's possible. I think that it certainly is overwhelming for parents, especially I can only imagine. There's so much information that you get when you leave the hospital after a diagnosis. And it's hard when, emotions are high and you can't really totally digest all that information. So I think that having some sort of simple tool that you can share with your kids in the form of this story is hopefully going to be really helpful for parents and for kids.
Yeah, because, boy, when I know myself, when I leave the hospital with some information that the doctor gives me, it's like, there's too much of it. And
right.
It's just, you want me to read this? The print's like this big, and there's about a zillion words here, and I don't understand half of them. And so, yeah, being able to sit down with a fun little picture book, whether your kid is 5 or 7, I'm imagining it could be comforting with a teenager who is diagnosed with type 1 diabetes.
Yeah, when I was explaining my condition to friends and family when I was diagnosed later in life, it was hard for them to understand because really you're just kind of relaying what your doctor tells you. And like we talked about earlier, the kind of jargon that doctors use sometimes, it can be overwhelming and hard to translate. So I remember, having an episode where my blood sugar was low. And when your blood sugar gets low, it's important that you have a piece of candy or juice or something to get those blood sugar levels back up. But I remember my friends and family would be like, oh, do you need some insulin right now? Which would actually do the opposite. It would drive the blood sugar even lower. So having, I think, something that they can refer to and just be more familiar with the condition. I think that this will resonate with kids and adults and really anyone of any age.
Yeah. One of the things that I love to really emphasize for the people out there listening, because the vast majority of people who are listening do not have a child who's been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. But the chances are that their kids are going to be in school at some point with a kid with type 1 diabetes. What's the percentage of the population that has this disease, disorder?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head, but I've been touched by so many stories from parents and from other kids that have said, I know somebody at my school with type 1 diabetes. I have a cousin with type 1 diabetes. My neighbor is a type 1 diabetic. And even if you don't necessarily know if they're a type 1 diabetic, but you hear, their continuous glucose monitor going off and kind of beeping in the day, or, you notice that they're wearing an insulin pump. Things like that, where it's normally an invisible condition, having these identifiers and connecting it with a story, I just hope will bring more empathy and understanding around type 1 diabetes.
Yeah. And that was what I was driving at. Because I love, we talk a lot about books being windows, mirrors, and sliding glass doors. And this book is a wonderful window into the life of somebody with type 1 diabetes. And I wouldn't wait until you find out that there's a kid in your kid's school with type 1 diabetes. I think this would be a wonderful book to read with your kids so that when they're in school and that kid comes in maybe 3 or 4 years from now and they have that glucose monitor on or they have that insulin pump, your kid can be the one that stands up and say, no, that's not weird. He has something and this is how it's helping him stay healthy. Your kid can be the advocate.
Exactly. And I love, how there is this movement around kids literature right now where we're trying to build more inclusive libraries for kids where they are aware of these different conditions, different backgrounds of people. And I think that is so important to be proactive from that standpoint. So in my opinion, this certainly is a book that I think will, resonate with all kinds of kids.
Yeah. Do you think that learning about a kid who is challenged with type 1 diabetes can maybe help a kid who is struggling with a learning difficulty or severe allergies? Would that be a way to kind of sit down and go, wow, I'm not the only one that has an issue. There's lots of kids who are struggling with all types of different things.
Yeah, everybody is so different, and we all have different things that we're dealing with, whether it's something physical, emotional, mental. There are, so many different paths that we're all walking down. So the fact that we can teach just looking for the bright side and having empathy for one another, I think that is so important, especially going into the school year right now. And things are so crazy in the world. And I think that just having more of that compassion for each other really does help and goes a long way.
Yeah. Now that you've written Teddy Talks and people are getting to know about it, and you said that you've always wanted to be a children's author, have you caught the writing bug, or have you said, okay, I've done that, I can move on to other things right now?
No, I am fully on board, and it's so exciting to be able to really fulfill this dream and see this book come to life and touch so many people. And I would love to see it turn into a series. I think that there are so many different directions that we can go in, whether we continue with, focusing on the different elements of type 1 diabetes, or maybe we even expand to other areas where, it's maybe challenging for families to have conversations around sensitive topics, and kind of using Teddy Talks as a tool for them to facilitate those conversations.
Yeah. You bring up a really, really good point. We talked earlier about sharing this book with your kids who are typically healthy so that they can have some more empathy for other kids. But you just made a point. I think this is a really great way to start having important conversations about lots of sensitive issues. I've long said that, especially to younger parents, who are asking me, wow, my kid's 4 or 5 years old right now. I don't know what I'm going to do when they're teenagers, and I have to have that drug talk with them. I have to have that sex talk with them. And I say to them, you start that conversation now. Not necessarily about drugs or alcohol, but you start talking to them about making healthy choices and about the consequences of choices and about things like type 1 diabetes. And you have these conversations with your kids when they're 5, 6, and 7 years old, and you continue talking up to your kids about characters they're meeting in books who are challenged. Those scary talks are much easier when they get to be teens.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's all about, like you said, normalizing when they're young. And I was just blessed with a beautiful baby girl in June of 2020, and I have another baby on the way in 2 weeks, actually. And that's been really on my mind of how do we have these conversations? How do we normalize this early on? How do we speak to kids in a way that they will understand and not be scared, but be aware of, the impact on some of these things.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said that you're expecting your child in 2 weeks. We're actually kind of hoping that, maybe the baby comes a little bit early, like sometime during the interview. That would be a real scoop that we could have, maybe get some viral videos going.
Right, exactly. And it's so funny because when I was pregnant with my daughter, for those that don't know, Teddy is my little Pomeranian puppy. So Teddy is actually a real dog. And I remember leading up to, the labor and delivery. I was like, I just wish I could have Teddy in the hospital room with me. He would just make me so calm. It would make things go so much better. So, unfortunately with COVID, we couldn't even have, my parents, my sisters in the room, but I was FaceTiming with everyone and had to make sure Teddy was on FaceTime with me for a lot of labor and delivery.
Oh, that's one. Well, I'm really excited that lots of families are going to get to know Teddy. And, I'm glad you brought this up. One of the first things that I thought of, when you told me that you were expecting and expecting in 2 weeks was, wow, somebody with type 1 diabetes can have children and live a pretty normal life.
Yeah, of course. And, I just really, that's the message that I want to get across. We were so blessed with our amazing daughter and, hopeful that things go smoothly for the second time around as well. We have amazing doctors that we're working with really closely. Because I'm a type 1 diabetic, it is considered a higher risk pregnancy, because hormones can have such an impact on your blood sugar. But I have an amazing husband, amazing family support system that help me just make sure that I'm putting my health first and, doing everything that they can to reduce stress and make sure that it's a great experience.
That's wonderful. Well, before we end, November is Diabetes Awareness Month. Is it for both type 1 and type 2?
Yeah, I believe it is for both, and we're so excited to be partnering with some, amazing foundations. We are donating 100 books to the Children's Hospital of Michigan to help get the word out there. We're partnering with Diabetes Youth Services to help get some resources to families that, are recently diagnosed. And we're also donating a portion of our proceeds to Dr. Fossman's lab, who's working really hard to find a cure for type 1 diabetes. So we're really excited for all of this and eager to have the book come out on October 15th. We're very fortunate to see that there's already been great kind of recognition. We got a Gold Mom Choice Award already and a 5-star Reader's Favorite Award. So we're really excited to see where this is going to go, and hopefully this will be a great tool, especially for the month of November.
Well, that's incredible. We wish you lots of luck, and what great things that you're doing. And I'm really excited that there's somebody working on a cure. It seems like the pharmaceutical industry is really interested in giving you medicine that helps you live with diseases, and that's great. But, it's like, can we cure something?
I know, yeah, and we're so grateful for Dr. Fossman and her team and the role that they're playing. They're really doing a lot of great work to understand the role of the immune system and how it affects this autoimmune disease. And she's brilliant. So we're really excited to be partnering with her lab.
Awesome. Well, we need to let people know where they can go, not only to find out more about Teddy Talks, but also find out more about Diabetes Awareness Month and how they can get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have our website, messengerpublishingbooks.com, and you can find Teddy on TikTok and Instagram at Teddy the T1 Dog. And we'll be updating our website, especially in the month of November, with a lot of great resources for families to use to have these conversations around diabetes.
Okay, so you cut out just a little bit when you're giving the website. It's Messenger?
Messengerpublishingbooks.com.
Messengerpublishingbooks.com. Go there to find out more about Teddy Talks, find out more about Vanessa. Maybe there'll be pictures of the new baby up. Who knows? And also find out more about how you can get involved in spreading awareness about type 1 diabetes. Hey, Vanessa, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Jed. It was great speaking with you.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Julie Stamm. She'll be here to celebrate Some Days, a great new picture book. Hey, if you're the author of a fantastic children's book, we would love to help you tell the world all about it. We have some great ways to let people know that they should take a look at your book. First, you can be a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast. It's fun, it's easy, it doesn't cost you a thing, and it gives you a chance to tell thousands of people about your fantastic children's book. We also have our really popular Certified Great Read program. If our panel of teachers, parents, and kids believe that your book is worthy of 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, it becomes a Certified Great Read. And with that status comes a number of really powerful tools to let people know that your book is worthy of their consideration. And finally, we just launched in November a great promotional program for authors that will let us promote your book on our website to our social media followers of over 50, 60,000 people, and can also get your book seen on a national network of pedestrian billboards. You want to check all those programs out, go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page. Scroll on down to see which service you're interested in. Hopefully you're interested in all of them. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to thank our guest, Vanessa Messenger. Be sure to check out her fantastic book, Teddy Talks. And also, learn more about diabetes during November Diabetes Awareness Month. Also want to thank our sponsor, Jennifer Swanson, and her award-winning book, Astronauts and Aquanauts. Check it out today. Also, check out Jennifer's podcast, Solve It for Kids. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Brady, Michael Murphy. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you on the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.